Welcome back to another episode of the Pack and Clint Show here on Total Coverage Sports. Please like, subscribe, comment, retweet, follow Ghost on Twitter, follow the Total Coverage page on Twitter, on YouTube. Follow Clint at NBA Hornboy, me at Pack Talks XO. Really glad you guys are here with us on a Tuesday. The national title was obviously yesterday. Clint and I will break down some of that game. We'll talk about our reactions, what we thought of it, and then we'll give a little bit of a season recap in terms of what we learned from a college football season perspective. And then for most of the show, we're going to be talking about the Texas portal. We'll talk about Texas position groups. We'll give grades for each position. We'll give our thoughts, what we thought they did well, what we think maybe wasn't up to standard. And then we'll talk about, based off the portal, what our way too early season predictions are. This is going to be a little bit, there might be an update again next week because, as some people know, the portal doesn't officially close until Wednesday for some of the guys that did not play in the championship game. And that's just because of the fact that you only had to declare your intentions to enter the portal by last Friday. And because of the business days and the fact that there was MLK Day yesterday, there's going to be a little bit of time. So some guys may enter the portal. Who knows if a guard enters the portal? That'll probably be someone Texas is super interested in. And then Indiana and Miami, those players can enter the portal until Saturday. So for all intents and purposes, the portal is over, but just be out on the lookout for that. Outside of that, we have a really good show for you guys. So super excited for you guys to be here. Clint, how you doing?
Doing good. National championship was really good last night, and I'm just ready to get into some portal talk. Go over how both of us think that Texas executed the portal.
Yeah, so we'll start right off with the national championship. Indiana won really, really good game, 27-21, got a pick late. Miami was driving it, was in Indiana territory, and then obviously Carson Beck throws an interception with about 45 seconds to go on a hole shot that he really poorly underthrew. The cornerback was playing a sink technique. He was a cover two corner, and you got to give a lot of credit to the last name Sharp. I don't know the first name. I apologize, but a lot of the times when you see cover two corners, what they'll end up doing is if there's no one in the flat, they'll just stay there. But 22 saw that there was no one underneath him, so he continued to sink under the vertical route. And because of that, he was able to get an interception. So that's a great play. And that's kind of an encapsulation of what Indiana has been all year and why they beat Miami, because they consistently make the right play. They consistently play with great instincts. They consistently do a great job of doing their job and understanding what they're being challenged with and what they're being attacked with. A lot of corners when they're in cover two, they're just going to play the flat. They're not going to sink. Indiana doesn't do that. They do a great job of, when they're not asked to do something, they'll be football players. They're not robots. And that's something that you got to give their coaching staff, Brian Haynes, their DB coach, their D line coach, their linebackers coach. All of them do tremendous jobs. To me, I think the better team won yesterday. I know Bill Connolly put out a tweet talking about the post game win expectancy, and Miami's post game win expectancy rate was something like 85%. Watching the game yesterday, I'm not sure I came away with that impression. I thought Indiana, for large stretches of the game, was the better team. Outside of really the third quarter, I felt like Indiana was the better team. I thought they were able to really do a great job in terms of the run game. Didn't feel like Miami, for large stretches of the game, had any form of a consistent run game. Carson Beck did not look confident in the pocket. It was a lot of checkdowns, not only because he wasn't seeing the field super well, but also because of the pressure and all the different things that Indiana was doing to take away routes. I thought it was a good defensive performance from Indiana. And then Fernando Mendoza made a couple of incredible plays. Charlie Becker Kind of what you expect from those two guys if you've watched them over the last 2 months. And Indiana did what they do. They figured out ways to win. It wasn't always the prettiest, but it's kind of been what they've done this year. The Iowa game wasn't super pretty. The Penn State game wasn't super pretty. The Ohio State game wasn't very pretty. And now the Miami game wasn't super pretty, but they found ways to win. They did it with special teams. They did it with big plays from Mendoza. Their defense made plays when they needed to. And it yesterday kind of was the Indiana season in a nutshell. And that's why they're the national champions.
Yeah, I came away with a lot of similar things. I think Indiana, for the most part, was a better team. I think at certain points you saw Miami start to get momentum when they were driving down the field, especially late in the game. I felt like their offense started to catch their stride and started to figure out the defense. But unfortunately, they figured it out too little, too late. Had an opportunity to drive down six with a minute 30 to go, which that drive was essentially going to be the game, as we assume that he's going to make the extra point. Felt like for part of that drive, Miami was going to end up scoring because at certain points, Malachi Tony made a really good catch. You had CJ Daniels make one, and then I saw a bunch of people say this, that it was fitting that Carson Beck's career ends that way, and it kind of was, to be honest. I mean, he's been known in his career for, and especially in late game moments and moments where you need to be clutch, not making the clutch play and turning the ball over. So it was the Indiana win was the greatest coaching job in college football history. I don't think there's anything necessarily close to it. You have a team that historically was the losingest team in college football. Before Sir Kurt Cignetti got there, I think their 2 seasons before that they were 2-10 and 3-9, and then he comes in his first season, goes 11-1 with essentially a bunch of group of five players from JMU, and takes them to the playoffs, and then they fall short versus Notre Dame. And then this year, you had talks all over the offseason talking about that there may never be a 16-0 team, there may never be an undefeated team. Well, right after that, Kurt Cignetti does it. He's up there with the greatest coaches, if not the greatest coach in college football. I don't know any other coach that could have made a type of transition like this. So props to him, and props to Indiana. Fan base deserves it. I couldn't imagine going through all those seasons and finally winning a national championship. I mean, that's got to feel good. So, other than that, Fernando Mendoza played good, put his body on the line. He really took some hits, and especially on that one touchdown. Miami's edges, they played very well as they have all season. It was definitely a defensive battle at the start for sure. But as I said earlier, in the fourth quarter, it really started to become more offensive. But Indiana was able to respond with every response that Miami gave, and ultimately the better team won that day.
Yeah. You saw Peyton mention it, 24 picks in the last 2 years for Carson Beck. It's been a real problem for him. All three losses for Miami have their last offensive possession has ended with Carson Beck throwing an interception, threw a pick in overtime against SMU, obviously threw the interception yesterday, and then Louisville. I think he might have thrown 3 or 4 picks. He threw 4 picks, but I can't remember if one of them got called back. And obviously, their last possession ended in interception. So it's been a real problem for him in terms of ball security, just making good decisions. And this is one of those times where it kind of makes you wonder about the Tommy John surgery that he had last offseason because even on that 3rd and 6 scramble where he throws it to CJ Daniels on a broken route. There's not a whole lot of velocity on that throw. It's it's repeatedly shown when he's throwing the ball. There's just not a lot of zip. It kind of feels like all the arm strength or all the horsepower he had has been completely taken away. You could kind of tell because he underthrew that by like 2 yards. It wasn't really close. Um, and that's a throw that really that's about a 40-yard throw maybe. That's not asking a whole lot. That's not a throw that you're asking only like Justin Herbert or Patrick Mahomes to make. That's a throw that a lot of guys can make, and he woefully missed it. And then I think what was super interesting about yesterday, and we're not going to talk too much about this just because there'll be a lot of analysis by other people, and really we want to focus more on the portal right now. But I thought the schematic way that Corey Heatherman attacked Indiana was really, really interesting. you saw them bring a lot of 5-man pressures and play a lot of 3 deep, 3 under pressures. And really early in the game, they were playing really off with their corners. And if you're a Texas fan, you understand the pain of that because you saw all year teams taking hitches and slants and taking comebacks and curls as a way to get free access yards and a way to get into second and short, second and one, and all these different things. And early in the game, Indiana, especially in the first half, Indiana lived off of that. It felt like that was pretty much their entire offense. They were getting to second and three, and then they're able to run the ball for about like 2 to 4 yards, get a first down. They were super methodical in that way, and then in the second half, Miami played a lot more press. And they even when they weren't playing press, they would play press and bail. So they would show press, and on the snap, they would get into a half turn. They would turn their ass to the sideline, shuffle, right? And they did that to take away some of the free access throws. That allowed them to get their pass rushers more involved. That's what you saw Ruben Bain and Mesidor. I think they ended up with 3 sacks combined in the second half alone. So that's kind of where you saw that pass rush really come in is when Miami, even when they pressured in the second half, it was a lot more cover one pressures. They were playing a lot more man coverage. It was less zone coverage, which is what you saw in the first half and what it felt like Indiana took massive advantage of. And then kind of what Indiana does against man coverage is throw the back shoulder fade. They're the best back shoulder fade team I think I've ever seen in my entire life. They their conversion rate is exceptionally high. There's the old like a lot of people will say the back shoulder fade isn't a great route in the red zone. For Indiana, it might be the single best route ever because they hit it at such an outrageous rate. And that showed up yesterday. It's kind of like it felt like Miami, especially in the second half, had about as good of a game plan as you could have for Indiana. And Fernando Mendoza made incredible plays. Obviously, the scramble on 4th and 5 in the red zone, bouncing off a hit after making a jump cut to avoid a tackle. The throws to Charlie Becker, he had 2 of them, one on a 3rd and 5, the other one on a 4th down, right? So they made some incredible plays. And so to me, that was my main takeaway was I thought Indiana won this game. I didn't think Miami lost it. I thought Indiana won the game. And to me, that's a great way to recap the season. Truly, I think the best team in the country won the national title. And whenever that happens, I'm pretty happy. Like I can live with all the other stuff. Uh, I think it also presents an interesting question, which is how do you go about building a team going forward, right? Because both of these teams in the national title, they each had more than half of their starters come from the portal. They're pretty heavy portal driven. You from a Texas perspective, this year I think they took about 20 to 23 kids in high school. It was definitely less than what they took in 2025 and 2024. You've seen them, and really what you saw was they took a lot of blue chip guys, right? They took a lot of 5 stars, and then a lot of it was more developmental guys. They didn't take a lot of low 4 stars, a lot of mid 4 stars that wouldn't play early. Like a lot of the guys that they took, I think you're going to see play next year. And so it's an interesting conversation of how do you go about building your team going forward? Do you take maybe what Lane Kiffin's done at LSU, where they've gone super heavy in the portal and they're just signing blue chippers? Do you try to take more of the Georgia approach or the Ohio State approach, where you're really heavy into high school and you develop your guys and that's what you're going to do? Do you try to find a middle ground, which it seems like is what Texas is trying to do? Those are all really interesting questions that, especially over the next 2 years, I think will really tilt who ends up being a power nationally and who starts to fade off.
Yeah, I did want to touch on one of Peyton's comments real quick. With him being a baseball guy, Tommy John surgery with that injury specifically being very notorious with pitchers in all levels of baseball, whether it's high school, college, or MLB. It is a true 2-year recovery. He's right on that. But weirdly enough, what you hear from a lot of people, especially a lot of pitchers, is that once they get once they recover fully, they tend to have higher velocity on their balls and they tend to have more strength. Obviously, a lot of that has to do with the rehab, but I think it's with the way the muscle grows back, it causes more strength. But yeah, you could definitely tell, even this whole season, that his zip wasn't there that he had the previous year. And Charlie Becker, that dude's one of the most amazing receiving tight ends I've ever seen. I mean, on those back shoulders, he made some incredible catches, especially the one where he had to turn back and catch it at his side. That was really good. Special teams also played a huge factor with the blocked punt, and then we talked about this during the game at halftime. That missed field goal ended up being huge for them because if they make that field goal before halftime, the Carson Beck maybe doesn't force the ball downfield. Maybe he just tries to get a couple more yards to get him in the field goal range, and that game probably goes to overtime. Or I don't know. I don't know what that kicker's field goal range is, but that every single phase of the game is going to affect it, and every missed field goal will affect how you play the game, and every part of it. It shows how important every single aspect of the game is, and why it's just the true team sport. If you don't have anything else to say, I think we can move on to the portal.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say is you mentioned Charlie Becker. I think he's going to end up being wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 next year because, I mean, you look at the way he played, and he's a really good route runner, understands nuance really well. He attacked Brandon Finney the week before against Oregon at a really high level. He's a great route runner. I don't know what he's going to run, but he's 6'3", 200 pounds. And that speaks to what we were just talking about, which is how you approach the portal. That's what we're going to talk about next. But Indiana showing you can win from the transfer portal if you get the right guys and if you have the right development and if you have the right scouting. Clint and I, we looked at the Texas class. We graded each position. If you want to pull that up, Clint, we can talk about it
Yeah.
and kind of go through our separate thoughts and our what we thought, what our kind of rationale was for each grade.
Yeah. So starting off, we're going to do the offensive special teams. For the quarterback position, Pack and I have both put an A. Only action in that position room in terms of the portal for Texas. Hold on,
What happened here?
I got it. Okay, so in terms of the quarterback room for the transfer portal with Texas, the only action that we saw was Trey Owens transferring out. I believe that he transferred to Arkansas State. Um, uh, Quarterback wasn't necessarily a position that Texas needed. You maybe wish that they got another experienced backup like you had with Matthew Caldwell this year, but we didn't do that. I'm going to assume that Sark and the offensive staff have trust in KJ Lacey, and they recruited him. So essentially, they would like to use him in some sense. Hopefully, we don't have to go that route. Hopefully, Arch doesn't get hurt. But so I think we both give it an A, as it wasn't necessarily a huge need. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, to me, I think it makes sense to trust KJ Lacey as quarterback 2 and then Dia Bell as quarterback 3. Especially because, for one, I think it gets them super valuable reps, knowing that KJ Lacey and Dia Bell are going to be competing for QB1 in 2027, speeding them up and forcing them to get more reps in practice, force them to get more meaningful reps in practice. I think that only accelerates their development, which is really, really important for 2027 because that is going to still be a really talented Texas roster. And you do need to have some level of confidence in your quarterback. And you get that confidence from seeing them play well. And you can build that confidence by showing them what live reps look like. So to me, I liked the approach of not taking anyone and just living with what the room is. I feel comfortable with KJ Lacey as quarterback too. I know the staff does. So to me, that's an A. Moving on to running back, getting Raleek Brown and Hollywood Smothers. That's about as good as it gets. That's 2 of the 6 best running backs in the portal. And to get both of them, now you've got a real upgrade in terms of the running back room. So you feel really, really good about that if you're Texas. Uh, the big thing to me and what I think is going to be super impactful about the running back gets is you're going to see the O line grade, and the reason why running back is now going to be so important is because if Raleek Brown or Hollywood Smothers, if they can turn 2 yard gains into 4 yard gains, or 2 yard gains into 5 yard gains, or -1 into 2, and just figure out ways to keep Texas ahead of the sticks, I think that's going to be really, really important for Texas. I think that's going to go a long way in terms of keeping Arch from being hit so much, and then putting Texas in third and manageable, where I think you're going to see the offense hit a really, really high level and a really high ceiling just because of the skill sets of the different guys that they have in the receiver room and the tight end room.
Yeah, so reason I gave it an A, even though we lose five different backs, you lose Trey Wisner to Florida State, you lose CJ Baxter to Kentucky, you lose Christian Clark to South Carolina, Jarrett Gibson to Purdue, and I don't believe Ricky Stewart has committed anywhere. But you have five guys leave the room. But what you do bring in is you bring in two 1,000-yard backs. You bring in and both backs pretty diverse. I feel in their play style. You have Raleek Brown, who he's going to be a lot. He's going to be a big impact in the backfield. You can almost see him as maybe a Jadon Blue type running back, to where he has a lot of speed, very shifty, and he can be a really big threat in the receiving game. And then you have Hollywood Smothers, who I would maybe equate to somewhat of a mix between Wisner and Brooks. I think that he has the speed. I think that he has great contact balance. I think that his agility is really good. I think that he has really good patience. I think that our running back 1 and 2 are going to be definite upgrades in both of those positions than we had this year. Then you have also with running back 3, that competition is probably going to be between James Simon and Derek Cooper. I see Cooper probably taking that, but we'll see. And then I think you also have Michael Terry in that room somewhere down that depth chart. But even though we lose 5 running backs, I think the two that you bring in, is more than all the production of those 5 running backs that you had this year. So I think they're guys that can be huge impacts. And if you don't have an O-line that is playing necessarily well during a game, I think that those guys are players that can really pick up the workload and get a lot more yards after contact and make the job easier on the offensive line. Now going to the wide receiver room, me and Pack both gave it an A+. I'll give my reasoning why, and then I'll let him go. In terms of the wide receiver room, we lost 4 guys. You lose DeAndre Moore to Colorado, Parker Livingston to Oklahoma. You lose Jamie French to Michigan, and Aaron Butler is still in the portal finding a team. But the reason why I give it an A+ is you bring in the best wide receiver in the portal. You bring in a guy who's going to be a future top 10 pick in Cam Coleman, highly coveted. Battle ended up coming down to Alabama, Texas Tech, and I wouldn't say necessarily Texas A&M, but they were in that mix technically. But getting Cam Coleman was huge because we talked about in the last show, I believe. Ryan Wingo, he's not a bad receiver at all. I think he did decent given the role that he was given this year of being the wide receiver 1. But I think with his skill set and how he plays the game, I think that he's going to thrive so much better to wide receiver 2. And bringing in a true wide receiver 1 like Cam Coleman will make the job so much easier, not only on Wingo, but on Arch, on the offensive line. And then you have Emmett Mosley at wide receiver 3. You have a very diverse wide receiver room in their skill sets and what they bring to the table. You have a bunch of different weapons now. Emmett Mosley and Cam Coleman both have great hands, in my opinion. And then you have Wingo, who has that speed that you can use more so in motions. You can use him in the screen game a lot more than you did this year. And then with the backups, you have Khaleke Lockett and Jermaine Bishop coming in and other guys. So, and maybe even a bit more, I'd say running back, but I digress with that. But you have a very good wide receiver room. Despite losing 4 guys, I think that Cam Coleman will make up for it. DeAndre Moore was great. I think he was a good route runner. And then Livingston, he had some moments. But I think bringing in Cam Coleman is going to really elevate this receiving room and not only make the team better and not only help the offense, make everyone else around him better.
Yeah, I think you said it really well. Texas added the best wide receiver in the portal, and they added a potential top 10 pick at receiver. It really doesn't get much better than that. You really can't add much more than adding the best guy in the portal, adding the second best receiver in the country. It's a really big deal for Texas. It gives Arch Manning more of a security blanket. It allows Ryan Wingo to move back to more of a Z and allow him to move off the ball. You can do some different motion with him. You can now move Emmett Mosley back inside, and with how good of a route runner he is, I think that's going to be a real strength because he's now going to have the opportunity to have 2-way goes, right? When you're outside, you don't have that same opportunity because you've got the sideline there. Now you've got the whole field to work with as a route runner. So I think that's going to be really, really helpful for Emmett Mosley. So all things considered, I think it was about as good of a portal haul as you could get. I gave it an A plus because, like you mentioned, this is the best receiver in the portal, and it's probably a top three receiver in the country. So you literally can't do better than that. For tight ends, they added Michael Muscanis, I think is how you say it. He's a really good blocker. I think he at least allows Texas to play more 12 personnel. So to me, I gave it a B plus. I would have liked to have seen them try to get someone that's maybe a little bit better of a route runner, has a little bit more explosiveness in the pass game because when you're in 12 personnel, it's really, to me, going to have to be heavy play action stuff where you're keeping him in protection and you're basically running like 70 or 60 series, which is 6 man or 7 man protection stuff. So you're going to, in terms of 12, you'll still be pretty limited from a pass game concept to me, which is the only reason it's a B plus. But I do think with Nick Townsend and Muscanis, you're going to be able to run the ball out of 12. And at minimum, because you trust Trevor Gooseby, if you wanted to, you could really load up and put both tight ends to Gooseby's side and just run off tackle and run to those two guys a bunch. And that may end up being really successful for Texas. So I gave it a B plus.
Yeah, so this is gonna be the first grade where me and Pac differ. I gave it an A minus. You lose Jordan Washington to North Carolina, but you bring in Michael Masunas, who former teammate of mine, so I've watched him a lot at Michigan State. I think he's a very good blocker, and granted, his strength is not going to be in the pass game, but I think he can bring something in the pass game to us. I think he has good hands. He's not going to be the fastest guy at all. He's not going to be the most shifty. But I think if you need to get someone on the ball that in like a short yard situation, like a Juan Davis, who I think had decent hands, I think that Michael Masuas could bring that too. And then you also have Nick Townsend, who you mentioned earlier, who I think will be our big tight end in the passing game. And then you have behind him also Emery Winston and Spencer Shannon, who those guys probably won't get many reps at all, but you definitely get to run a lot more 12 personnel. And it really brings us something that we lacked this year with a tight end who could truly block, because Jordan Washington, all respect to him, I don't think he was that amazing of a blocker, nor was Jack Andrews or really any other guy that we put in. So I think this is a huge get for us, and it allows you a lot to run a lot more 12 personnel, which Sark made obvious he really wanted to run at the beginning of the year. And I think it gives you a lot more variety of what you can do with a two tight end set. Now going to O line, which I think is where me and Pack are going to have the most stark difference in what our opinion of the portal was in terms of offensive line. In terms of what we lose, you lose Neta Umeozulu. You lose Connor Strode to, I believe, Kansas. You lose Nate Kibble and Daniel Cruz, and then you also lose Nick Brooks to Alabama. You lose a lot of depth pieces right there, so it's not going to be a great grade for me. You do bring in Sikorsky from Oregon State. You bring in Newman from Texas A&M, and then you bring in Siani from Wake Forest. We talked last week about Seton, which we're not going to get too much into that because that's going to be beating a dead horse. But it's not ideally what you wanted in the portal offensively, especially on the offensive line. As I stated before the season ended, that I think offensive line was what I wanted to be tackled first more than anything. I don't think we did terrible, like as an F grade. I think that Newman was 100% something for the future, a depth piece. He was a guy who had no snaps at A&M, I don't think, and is, I think, a true or redshirt freshman. Sikorsky he played a lot at Oregon State this year. I think his grade was okay. And then Siani is going to be our best get in the portal. He's a guy who, at least he was either on 3 or 24/7 Sports, ranked 4th in the transfer portal for offensive tackles. We've talked about, I know you differ from whatever recruiting site that was on Siani. I think he's decent. I think that him or Campbell, you could put them inside a guard, which it's going to be Campbell that ultimately gets put inside a guard. But I think in terms of starters, I think with the weapons that you've surrounded around Arch and that you've um, given this offense, I think that it gives the O line a little bit of room to mess up, which I hate having to say that, but I think it's gonna be better than this last year because this last year the offensive line was horrible. I don't think you can get much worse than that, but it wasn't necessarily what I wanted. But it's not something that I'm too mad about. That I think is just gonna that's just gonna keep us from playing for a national championship. I think we still can, but it's definitely not what you wanted ideally.
Yeah, so I gave it a D in part because of the Seton Siani stuff, which we talked about last week. I think we're not gonna keep going into that. I hated the process of it, and then to me, the problem I have with the offensive line is, and it's what you just mentioned. I don't know that I think the offensive line is going to be better than next year's, and part of that is because one, they still don't have a left guard. At this point, it's looking like it's going to be Dylan Sikorsky, who is really raw. I mean, you don't want him playing next year if you don't have to. You'd like him to be a depth swing piece where you can kind of move him from guard to guard if you need to. You don't want him to be a starter. And then Melvin Siani, I view as a 6'8" version of Brandon Baker, who's not very fluid in the hips and who has a really hard time getting low in his stance. You're going to see he lunges a lot. He's a really big waist bender. He has no ass on him. And in the SEC, you cannot have that. There's a story that Kirby Smart told about Bill Belichick and how at the combine he would go up and he would stand behind guys to see how big their ass was because that's a good sign for how much power they're going to have, what type of anchor they're going to have. And Melvin Siani has none of that. So that's a real concern for me. Um, I know on three rates him really highly. And to me, that's more indicative of how poor the offensive tackle class is in the portal than it is how good Siani is. I know his PFF grade is great. I watched him. I watched over 300 snaps of him play. I don't think this guy is an upgrade over Brandon Baker. And so you're maybe getting an upgrade at two positions, right? You think Trevor Gooseby is going to develop and get better. Some of that's a little in question now because of the injury, but you assume he'll get better. You assume Connor Robertson will get better, but then you don't know you're getting an upgrade at left guard with Sikorsky. I don't know that Brandon Baker is definitively going to be better than DJ Campbell at right guard. And I don't think Melvin Siani is better than Brandon Baker. So to me, I think there's a chance that Texas actually got worse at offensive line, as weird as that would sound. And that's why I gave it a D. There's a lot of things I didn't like about the approach, and not getting a left guard really, really hurts the grade. If they had a left guard, I think I would bump it up to a C because you could maybe work some things around, you could figure some things out. But right now, without a left guard, it's a D, and really, it's pretty damn close to an F, being totally honest. So I was really disappointed in the process from Texas. I don't think it was well thought out, and it does make me nervous. I do still think Texas can win a national championship, but there are a lot of things that are going to need to occur for that to happen.
Yeah, and then for the last position on this slide was special teams grade overall. I think that it was an A plus. I think you got what you needed, and I think you got as good as you could have gotten in the portal. Texas brings in a replacement for all three positions: long snapper, punter, and kicker, because all three of those guys were seniors this year, and all three have left the program. You bring in Trey Dubuque from New Mexico, who I watch film on him and I like what I see. Obviously, most people you're going to see long snapping, and it's just hey, as long as it's not a bad snap. I just like to watch a little bit more, and think he's a pretty good one. You have Mac Chiumento, however you
Yeah.
pronounce it, from Florida State. If you look at his numbers this year, he is actually an upgrade over Jack Boymeister, who I thought was a very good punter for us. He averages 44 yards on the dot for his punts. He had a long this year of 56 yards, and that was on 27 punts. And then I'm not sure what his and then he has inside the 28 out of his 27 punts, he has 13, so about a 50% rating landing inside the 20-yard line. And then you bring in Gianni Spedic, who was a Lou Groza Award semifinalist, who I would put up there with Mason Shipley, who but with a little bit more of a leg. So Mason Shipley was a great kicker for us. I think the one downfall you had with him was that he had a range and he couldn't really go too far. But I think that with Spedic you get more of a leg with him, and I think that you retain the same accuracy. So I really like what we did in all terms of special teams, and yeah, and then you also in the return game bring back Niblet, who was by far your biggest weapon in the return game.
Yeah, I think you said it well. I'm not as knowledgeable with special teams as you are, so I kind of took your lead on that one. I thought they did a good job. They addressed the needs that they had, and they did a good job of they did a really good job of getting those needs and getting value players at those, right. The kicker was a Lee Gorza, semifinalist or a finalist. I can't remember which one of the two, but
Semifinalists.
yeah, that's a pretty good sign if that's your kicker. They grabbed a good punter, and then as you said, their long snapper is pretty good. So did everything that they needed to do there. They retained a lot of depth in their DB room as well, which plays into special teams because a lot of those guys end up being gunners. A lot of the
Mhm.
receivers end up being gunners, and they were able to retain some depth there. So I think special teams will be good again, especially returning Ryan Niblett. So we'll move on now to the defensive side of the ball. As you can see, I gave me and Clint we agreed on defensive tackle and edge. I kind of viewed them together because to me the really only need that you had here was at nose tackle. I think you're fine at edge with Lance Jackson, Justice Terry, Colin Simmons, Brad Spence can move down there. You've got Smith Arogbo, Zena can play there. You've got a lot of depth there. I don't necessarily think you needed to add someone. Now, the reason I gave Edge a B was because once you did start to go after some of these bigger names, like a Jaden Woods, or you started talking about Princewell Uman Mielen, at that point, to even some of the other edges that they were talking to, like Wendell Gregory, or I think they brought in someone else, or they were interested in Caleb Hearing, to go over 4 and to not grab anyone, that's the only reason it's a B. Otherwise, it would be an A because I have no problems with bringing no one from the portal at edge. I think it's a real position of strength, to be honest. And then at defensive tackle, I would have liked to have seen Texas go after someone like Makai Barrow over someone like Ian Gafford. Gafford was fine last year. He's a run stuffing nose, which is probably what Texas wants and what they need to run the mid front. But to me, it wasn't. I don't think they upgraded per se. Right? They didn't get better than Brad. They didn't get better than Cole Brevard. They didn't get better than Travis Shaw, and those that was kind of what I was hoping for. So that's the only reason I gave it a B. If Clint, you can go ahead and give your reasoning now too.
Yeah, so with the D line room, you only lose two guys. You lose Melvin Hills, who goes to UConn, and then Levon Johnson, who transferred from Maryland to Texas and is going back to his original school. But you do bring in two guys. You bring in Ian Traffard from Arkansas, who I think that I don't think he's an instant upgrade, but I think he's young. He's a redshirt sophomore, I believe, or is he going to be a junior?
I think he's a redshirt sophomore.
Okay, so he's a redshirt sophomore, so he's not a guy that I think is going to be instantly better, but I think over time, while he's at Texas, he'll get developed and he'll be better. And then you have Zion Williams coming in from LSU. I can't sit here and act like I know too much about him. I haven't gone to watching him, but I think in the D tackle room, like Pack said, we really only needed a nose tackle because you lost Travis Shaw and Cole Rivard both at graduation. And then in the edge room, that's in my opinion our best position on the team. You have Colin Johnson, not Colin Johnson, Colin Simmons on one side, and then you have on the other side Lance Jackson, who I think is going to make a huge step this year, and I think he's going to be one of the bigger breakout guys. I think he did really good last year, but I think he has a real possibility to do a lot better. And then you have behind him Colin Vasek and some other guys, but edge was a position. Even though we did miss some guys, I just think it was a room that you really didn't need to touch. And to be completely honest, I don't think that you really needed anybody coming in. So I'll agree with him on B just because we didn't really do anything there. Next position that we're going to go with is linebacker. He gave it a C. I gave it a B minus. You lose LaFau to Colorado and Elijah Barnes to Kentucky. The Elijah Barnes one, I think, was probably the transfer that hurt the most out of all the guys that left. Um, but I think with the three guys you have coming in, I think you can have some positivity to look at it. Uh, with Boswell, you're going to bring in a guy who's going to be a developmental piece. He's very young. He's not a guy that you're going to see play a lot probably this year. Then you have Cryer coming in from FSU, who I don't think he's that great, but I mean he's just going to be a guy for depth in my opinion. And then you have Biles coming in, who I think is the big get at linebacker position at least for the portal. 1-3 ranked him the second ranked linebacker. He's going to be more of a. I think he's an off ball. I don't think he's a Mike. I think you do decent there. The reason why I gave it a B minus, not higher, is just because I would have liked to keep Bo Barnes, and I think just no matter what, it's kind of hard to replace Anthony Hill with what he brought at Mike. So I don't know you're going to necessarily upgrade from last year. But you also have Tyler Atkinson coming in, who I think towards the end of the season will be a huge impact guy for us. And then you have other pieces who I think could make a real big, who could play real big roles, such as Ty Anthony Smith. So, and then Brad Spence. So, I think overall this linebacker room looks fine. I know Pack wanted to see a little bit better, but I'll let him get into that right now.
Yeah, so I gave it a C because losing Bo Barnes for Justin Cryer and the Akron linebacker whose name I'm blanking on, to me is a
Boswell.
yeah, Boswell. I I'm not very happy with that, to be blunt. I think that was a pretty significant mistake. Justin Cryer's Florida State tape is not good. To me, that's a guy that you really only took because of the money you save. And then to not get Cade Ulave, to not get Christian Alegrio, to not even try to get Keaton Thomas or Robert Woodward uh, is a pretty fatal mistake to me, especially because I think at the moment you've got four playable linebackers right now. You have Rasheem Biles, you have Tyler Atkinson, Ty Anthony Smith, and Brad Spence. Those are the only four guys you can play. That's not a very. It's just a room without depth, and that was something that you kind of knew you had to add to this offseason. You knew you needed a few guys, and to get guys that you added depth, but you didn't add playable depth, and that's to me that's a mistake. Rasheem Biles is a good player. He's not an All SEC guy. He's not a future first round pick. I watch a lot of linebacker tape. Clint knows this. It's one of the two positions I work with over the summer when I'm installing defenses for a team. Uh, Rasheem Biles is a good player, but he's not even a top 10 linebacker in the SEC to put it into perspective. So Texas downgraded at linebacker from last year to this year, which is why I gave it a C. Now, the reason it's not lower is because I think Will Muschamp is going to do a good job of playing to guys' strengths. I think Tyler Atkinson, Ty Anthony Smith, Brad Spence, and Rasheem Biles, I think they're really good fits in the Muschamp system. I think they all do a good job as stack track fallback linebackers in terms of how they fit the run. So that to me was a positive. That's why I gave it a C and not lower. But Clint and I were fairly similar there, a B minus and a C, not super different. Moving on to corner, I gave it an A because you didn't lose anybody in the room that you couldn't afford to lose. And on top of that, you were able to get Bo Mascow in there, who's going to be able to play star for you. I think at pretty much every position now, in terms of corner and star, it's pretty much perfect. I don't think you can ask for much more. There's depth at every single position. Field corner, boundary corner. Like at boundary corner, you've got Cade Phillips and you've got Kobe Black who are able to play. At your field corner, you've got Grayson Littleton, you've got Robertson, you've got Samari Matthews, a 2026 signee. You've got Bo Mascow who can play there. And then at star, you've got Wardell Mack, you've got Bo Mascow, you can play Grayson Littleton there. So there's a lot of depth in the room, which is why I gave corner and star both A's. Only reason not an A plus. I think they could have gotten a better player than Bo Mascow. Personally, I do think they could have gotten especially if they wanted a star. Jonel Aguero had entered the portal. He went to Ole Miss. Sharif Denson entered the portal, and both of those guys played star at a really high level. So that's the only reason I didn't give cornerback and star an A, because I kind of bunched those two together, or an A plus. Sorry.
Yeah, so I think with the cornerback room, why I gave it an A plus. I like bringing in Bo Mascow. I think he just brings depth that we need. After losing Muhammad, you wouldn't bring in another guy to place that hole. I'm gonna tie this. I think I'm gonna tie just all the DBs and like when it comes to stars, strong safety with safety. Um, so would you have Warren Robertson more as a star than a strong safety?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's more of like in terms of where I would play him at corner first, and then I would play him
Yep.
at star, and then I would play him at safety. I don't think he's a natural safety, and really, there's a pretty significant difference in a must champ system between a corner and a safety. So I would not know.
Okay, so the reason why I gave cornerback an A plus then is because I think that even though you only bring in Bo Mascow, I think that um, being able to retain Kobe Black, Wardell Mack, and Warren Robertson, who all entered the portal and looked like we're all going to leave at one point, to be able to retain all of them, I think was an amazing job by the coaching staff and an amazing job by Will Muschamp. Because those three guys are huge pieces on the team and guys that are going to be huge contributors this next year. The only guy that at the time I saw being a huge contributor that didn't enter was Cade Phillips. But for a while, it looked like our cornerback room. It really made me start to worry about what we were going to see in the secondary. But I think retaining all three of those guys was an amazing job. You lose Caleb Chester to ASU and you lose Santana Wilson to Louisville. Both those guys weren't super big contributors. But cornerback room, I was very impressed. Not so much with who we got, but who we were able to retain after entering. So that's why I gave it an A plus. And then at the star, I really don't have too much to say on this. I think we retained who we needed to retain. I think whoever we put there is going to be good. I really don't have too much to say, to be honest. You can go ahead with that.
Yeah, so talking about strong safety, I gave it an A that in hindsight probably should be a B. I think the starting, like the first three guys, even four, it's got some positives, right? You've got Jelani McDonald, who will be a top 50 pick. You've got Derek Williams, who, if he can get back to what he was his freshman year, that's a really good safety tandem. Um, the problem, and then Xavier Filsaime, if he can take that leap from his sophomore to his junior year, that's a really strong top three. And then JJR, who played at linebacker in the bowl game, he's super versatile. So you hope that'll end up helping him out at safety. To me, the reason why I probably should have given it a B in hindsight is you just you kind of lack depth, similar to linebacker. Jonah Williams is going to miss 3/4 of the installs. He's not going to be there for winter installs or winter camp. He's not going to be there in the spring. He's not going to be there in the pre-summer stuff, and he's not going to be there for the summer. So those are three different times he's missing installs, and that's a lot of time to miss unless he's going to figure out ways to be part time with baseball during the season, which I don't think he is. You don't have a lot of playable depth there. You do need to see noticeable improvements from Xavier Filsaime and Derek Williams, and so that's the reason why I should have given it a B, just because there's a little bit of uncertainty there, but there is a lot of talent at the same time. So you do feel like you should be able to be fine there.
Yeah, it's pretty much all what you just said. The depth being the only concern for me, which why I also put it at B. Um, but Jonah Williams, that's a guy that I love Texas baseball, like a lot of Texas baseball fans. But I'm praying to God that someday he just hangs up the or puts the bat up and just stays on the football field. But don't see that happening, to be completely honest. But you have Xavier Filsaime and Derek Williams, who Filsaime has a lot of upside. I think has a lot of potential to be really good. I You have Derek Williams coming back, who wasn't necessarily great this year as he was in 24. Before the injury in 24, you saw him play. I think you saw him play really well, in my opinion. But injury, I think, kind of set him back. Jelani McDonald, who is going to be the biggest piece in that safety room, um, a huge job bringing him back when he could have declared. Um, but I think with the secondary in total, I'm not too upset with it. You may wish you could see one more safety gone in the portal, just for at least depth, or even a big guy like Makuba was for us. But overall, I'm not too disappointed with the defense. I would say the only position that I was truly disappointed with for the team overall is the offensive line. But if you don't have anything else to say, one last thing: what would you give the overall grade for Texas in terms of the portal?
I think a B minus. Um, I think they did some good things. They did some really high end things, but to me, the questions at offensive line weigh really heavy, and then linebacker depth. Those are two things that I think Texas really had to address in the portal, and I don't think they did a good job of either. So, B to a B minus would be my grade.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go a bit higher. I'm gonna go probably around a B plus. I think for me, I have a lot of confidence in Will Muschamp. I think that he can do a great job of developing some of these guys that maybe aren't looking great right now. Obviously, that takes a lot more time than easier, and it's also easier said than done. But I was really focused more so on the offense this offseason, because I think the offense was the biggest part of where we lacked last year. And even though we didn't do great on the offensive line, I think the skill position players that we brought in are huge. And I think that those guys overall are going to elevate the offense so much. And I think that in a lot of these games this past season, if we had somewhat of a competent offensive line, we played a lot better, and we would have maybe won a game or two, like namely Ohio State. So I'm very excited for the offense this year, at least. Offensive line, still worried, but in terms of the skill position, I like it. And defensively, I think we'll be better than last year overall. So I'm going to give it around a B to a B plus.
Yeah, he gives it a B plus. I gave it a B minus. Uh, all in all, Texas did improve through the portal. It's about all you can ask for. Now it's all about developing your guys, having really good, having a really good winter camp, doing a great job with your strength and conditioning, and then through pre-spring, spring, summer, and fall, doing a great job of teaching, developing the guys, getting them ready for the season. Clint, if you had to give a way too early season prediction, where are you at right now?
So right now, I'm going to pull the schedule real quick if that's all right.
Yeah. While you're doing that, I'll give mine. I'm currently at 9-3. Again, the offensive line is a really big problem for me, especially when it looks like LSU is going to add Princewell Uman one of the best pass rushers in the league. Um, they've got to go to Death Valley. They've got to play Ohio State. They've got to play Tennessee. They've got to play Florida. They've got to play Oklahoma, play A&M. And so to me, 3 losses feels like the most likely outcome because of what the offensive line currently is. Now, we'll see how that changes in the next day or two, whether or not Texas is able to add someone in the portal. If they are, it bumps it up to a to 10-2. But for now, I'll go 9-3 as my current thoughts, and then I'll let Clint go because I'll let Clint go now.
Yeah, so I have us going 11-1. I think there are 3 losable games in the schedule. I think that Ohio State's losable. I think that Ole Miss is losable, and I think that LSU is losable. I think that we start 4-0. I think that with Ohio State, I think that we'll be able to win that game being in Austin. And also, I think them hiring Cortez Hankton at wide receiver coach was one of the worst moves I've seen this offseason from a coaching staff. Uh, from what you saw that he did at Georgia and LSU, the only true receiver that I think you could say he developed was Lad McConkey, and that's it. If you can even say that. And at LSU, he did not have great wide receivers at all. I think in terms of Kyron Lacey and Brian Thomas, Malik Neighbors, those guys I think were already good before he came. I don't think he did too much to improve them. So, and then Tennessee, you saw them grab Ryan Staub in the portal from Colorado, which I'm assuming would be their starting quarterback that next year, which I think it's going to be a huge downgrade from Joey Aguilar. I'm not very high on him at all. So I think going into Neyland, that makes that game a lot easier. So I was starting 4-0. And then you have the Cotton Bowl, Oklahoma. They bring back John Mateer, so I'm not worried about that, to be completely honest. Just straight up like that. Florida, I think we win the game. I think it'll be close. Start off 6-0. Ole Miss, this is all going to depend on if Trinidad Chambliss comes back or not. Obviously, we can make our predictions if he does or doesn't, but right now it's an uncertainty. If he comes back, I'm going to have us losing that game. I just don't see us going undefeated. I don't see it happening, but I think that I'm going to assume that Chambliss comes back, and I'm going to say that that's the game that we lose. I think we beat Mississippi State, go to Missouri and win that. LSU would be the last losable game, in my opinion. I think that it's going to be a very close game. Death Valley, obviously, a very hostile environment, brand new coaching staff. You're going to see a lot more better of an offense than you saw last year. But I think that, in my opinion, of Sam Levitt, I don't think he's that great. I'm not super high on him. And with the foot issue, it's something that I know LSU is worrying about because depending on how that heals and how he's able to recover from that, his legs are a huge part of his game. And if he doesn't have that, he's not going to be very good. I see us winning that game despite all the gets that LSU has gotten. I think that Texas is going to be able to win that game, and I think Lane Kiffin also notoriously has a problem with choking when it matters at certain points. But Arkansas, I see us winning and then going to A&M. I think that offensively they downgraded promoting Holloman Wiggins to offensive coordinator. You bring back Marcel Reed and Mario Craver and bring in Isaiah Horton. But offensive line, I don't think they upgraded. I think they downgraded. I think on defense, I don't think they're going to be as good. So I was winning that game. So I was going 11-1. Depending on how the SEC shapes up that year, going to SEC championship, and I think we'll make a big run in the playoffs. So he has us going 9-3. I have us going 11-1. Anything else you want to add?
No, I think we're going to wrap it up there. Please like, subscribe, comment, retweet, follow Ghost at Ghost and Friends on Twitter. Follow me at Pack Talk XO. Follow Clint at NBA Hornboy, and then make sure to follow the Total Coverage Sports channel on Twitter. Follow them on YouTube. We appreciate all your support. And starting next week, Tuesday, Clint and I will be starting to break down topics. We'll break down what teams do from a scheme standpoint. Clint will start us off next week talking about whatever offensive concept he wants. I'll go the next week and I'll break down some defense, and I will help you guys understand what you guys are seeing on Saturdays and what you may see from Texas going forward next year. So be on the lookout for that. But that's all we have. And as always, have a good night, and we'll